Good morning and thank you for being with us. This is Khalil Hashim, editor of YaMichigan.com, the fastest growing digital business magazine in the Middle Eastern communities in Michigan. First, I would like to thank Layla Al-Husni, a dear friend, founder, and CEO of US Arab Radio, for giving us this great opportunity to discuss important issues in the community. US Arab Radio is the leading ethnic radio in North America, attracting millions of listeners in the US and the Arab world. Today, we have a special topic, a great topic about the Mahjar writers from Lebanese, Syrian, and Lebanese origin who have been living or lived in the United States. A lot of us are familiar with Khalil Gibran, Amin Rihani, Elia Abu Madi, and Mikhail Naimi, and others, great writers and poets of Syrian and Lebanese origins. But if you know that these writers lived in the United States, this has sparked a movement to cherish these writers and preserve their place in history. Today, we will be talking about the commemorating of Mahjar literature in the US, monument to the Arabic world in Manhattan. And with us today, we have Dr. Hani Bawardi, Associate Professor of History and the Arabic American Studies. We also have Dr. Linda Jacobs, is a New York-based independent scholar and author. We also have Bobby Madi, the president of the Save Washington Street Historical Society, who is also the grandson of the great poet Elia Abu Madi. What we're going to do is, before we start talking and before we go on with the interview, we're going to play a short video and to give us a segue into the program.
I came into New York Bay and found myself almost surrounded by cities, any one of which was far larger and grander than any I had seen in Europe. We passed close by the grand Statue of Liberty and saw in the distance the beautiful white bridge away up in the blue sky and the big buildings towering up like our own mountain peaks. I was almost prepared to see snow on their tops, though it was the summertime 9 years ago. My uncle had a friend who met us at Ellis Island and helped to get us quickly out of the vessel, and 10 hours after we had come into the bay, we were established in 2 rooms in the 3rd story of a brick house in Washington Street. Najib Diab, 1894. It was the mother colony, the first Arabic-speaking community in the United States, out of which Arab America was born. The immigrants who settled on New York's Lower West Side on Washington Street embraced their new cultural and social boundaries to becoming American. At the same time, they offered a bridge of understanding between East and West, between their new country and the old country. The political and cultural innovation that came out of the Syrian colony informed an emerging discourse on politics and identity that remains vital into the 21st century and foundational for any consideration of what it means to be Arab American. We're dedicated to educating the greater public about this early community through public events, community outreach, and partnerships with arts and educational organizations. We're now fundraising for our most ambitious and lasting arts and education initiative. In partnership with New York City's Percent for Art program, the Poetry in the Parks project will memorialize the profound literary output of the community's renowned Mahjar writers of Arabita, or the Pen League, which included Khalil Gibran, Mikhail Naimi, and Elia Abu Madi, to name a few. As a permanent tribute to the Mahjar writers, the art memorial will lie in a public park in Lower Manhattan, immediately adjacent to the former Syrian Quarter near Washington Street. A lasting tribute to New York's early Arabic-speaking community, artist Sarah Ohadu's design will set quotations from the writers in stone, tile, and stained glass that will be woven throughout the park, letting the poets speak for themselves.
It was all about building this bridge between the East and the West. And they did it in a beautiful way, and they left something that belongs to a unique culture. You can't avoid talking about them and the Arab world at that time. And it was about rising the Arab world in here, and then in the Arab world talking about what's happening in here. The responsibility we have here is huge, because what they did at that time is so unique that we are still learning actually from them.
غريبا من بلاد الشرق جئت، بعيدا عن حمى الأحباب عشت، اتخذت أمريكا وطنا عزيز، فكانت لي كأحسن من اتخذت. أتاها للغنى غيري، أني كما جاءوا مع الأقدام جئت، ولكني طلبت بها حياة مع الحرية المثلى فنلت.
This was a great video. I was looking up earlier today. I have studied Elia Abu Madi. I was born in Lebanon, and I have studied Khalil Gibran, Mikhail Naimi, and all of them. And I was just looking up some of their poetry for nostalgia. جئت لا أعين ولكنني أتيت، لقد أبصرت قدام طريقا فمشيت، وسأبقى سائرا إن شئت هذا أم أبيت، كيف جئت كيف أبصرت طريقي لا أدري. The translation, of course, for here I am, where I come from, I don't know, but there I am in front of me. I see a path, and so I walk, and I shall go on walking, willing or unwilling. What brought me here? What put me on this path? I cannot know. I'd like to welcome you all. This is from the great poet Elia Abu Madi. And I'd like to welcome you all this great segment. And I'm going to start with Dr. Bouardi. Please tell us a little bit about you and how did you get involved in this great project?
Well, I'm an immigrant who grew up with the poetry and prose of, members of Al-Rabit Al-Qalamiyya, or the Pen Bond. My path to academia was actually incidental to becoming very interested in logging the stories and experiences of the early immigrants. I was fascinated to know that there have been people here for 100 years, although I had a sense of destiny with New York because of Ali Abu Madi and Gibran and their colleagues. So that was the segue into my involvement with the society itself, and also my work in its nature delves into archives and manuscripts and the history, how we cultivated an identity. But in this particular project, I must say that, growing up over there, we heard about New York. And as a matter of fact, in a geography lesson, someone wrote, probably to be nice, he's probably never been to New York. He said that New York is a great city of so many million people whose inhabitants are known for their generosity. So that actually sounded great. But Ali Abu Madi stuck to our ribs. And so we grew up, listening to those poems, memorizing them. And Gibran's poems that were put to song by Ferouz, Sakan al-Layl, A'tani an-Naya wa Ghanni. And it's so fitting that you should mention those, the first quatrains of Lastu Adri by I do not know, or I know not, by Ali Abu Madi. So the second quatrain goes, أجديد أم قديم أنا في هذا الوجود؟ هل أنا حر طليق أم أسير في قيود؟ هل أنا قائد نفسي في حياتي أم مقود؟ أتمنى أنني أدري ولكن لست أدري. Which is profound. He says in the second quatrain that, am I new in this existence, or have I always been here? Am I free to control my destiny, or am I guided into this path. I wish I knew, but I do not know, which speaks to his immigrant experience. We really come here with a phone number, an address, and a one-way ticket. In that respect, I identify with Riyah Abu Madi completely. I came to New York with a phone number of my uncle in Chicago, hoping to go to college. So he brought with him all kinds of hopes and dreams, and for actually that reflected on his wishes for what Syria, natural Syria or greater Syria, and the Lebanon area would look like. So there's so much to talk about in terms of their poetry and prose that reflected on our hopes for our own countries overseas. So I bring with me the same hopes of transplanting some American precepts, although his time is different than mine. There is a lot to say about that. But at the time, America really represented, a new beginning for their lives across the waters.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter what time it is, the pain of being away from family and friends and country is the same. It may manifest itself differently. Right now we're fortunate with technology, but the pain is still the same. So it hurts the same. So what I like to do also is to ask Bobby to, I'm sorry, Bob Madi. Do they call you Bobby, or I just made it up?
There are people who call me Bobby. You're welcome to call me Bobby. Bob is fine.
We call you Mr. We call you Mr. Madi.
No,
could you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and then about the Washington Street Historical Society?
Sure.
You're the direct link to the great poet.
I am the direct link, and it's a little ironic. I was born here in the United States and raised as a second or third generation Arab American. Part of the bane of my existence is I don't speak Arabic, nor do I read. And so I was raised with the memory and the reputation of my grandfather, but with little access to his works. And so this has always been an intrigue for me. And it's been an effort. I've attempted to study the language, not very successfully, but also the community from which he came and the history of the writers. And that's been going on for 30 years now. Hani, you can speak to this, I'm sure. There was little in the way of work that was being done around this community. With time and certain events that may have been unfortunate, international events that brought the Arab American presence to the fore, there has since been a cadre of academics and work that's delved into this history. Which was great for me because I've always explored it as someone who wanted to journey through this story as a filmmaker, which is my professional background. So it's come to its fruition, and during that time, the Historical Society came about. And I was asked to join the board, and I'm happy to be here. We're pushing forward. Our mission is to advance the history and of the community and rightfully place it back into the American narrative, the narrative of what is America. Yeah,
and we're going to be talking more about that. And I like to also introduce Dr. Jacob. Good morning. I don't know if it is morning where you are, but good afternoon if it is. And it is in the PM. Could you please tell us a little bit about you and how you got involved in this?
Yes, I'm also third generation Lebanese, and all of my grandparents were members of the Syrian colony in Manhattan in the 19th century. They came from 4 different parts of Lebanon in the 19th century. And I realized about 10 years ago that no one had ever written anything about the Syrian colony in Manhattan. And I use the term Syrian, as you know, to mean Greater
Sure.
Syria. Everyone
Exactly,
asks
exactly.
about that. It's Lebanese and Syrian,
Yeah.
and from Palestine as well. So I decided that I was going to do some research. I'm an archaeologist actually by training, but I decided to turn myself into a historian and find out more about the Syrian colony in Manhattan, from which all the Rabita writers came as well. And so I've written a book about the Syrian colony between 1880 and 1900. And what I wanted to talk about today at some point were the literary antecedents to the Rabita,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
lots of stuff going on in the 19th century that no one knows about, literature-wise. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you speak Arabic?
I used to, because I ran a dig in Jordan, and so I used to speak Arabic quite well, but I've lost most of it now.
You understand it though?
Shway.
Shway. Shway. Sounds good. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a short break, and then we'll be right back to continue this great discussion.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
Welcome back, and thank you for being with us. This is Khalil Hashim with the Michigan.com and US Arab Radio, Radio Baladi. We are talking about writers and poets in the Mahjar. We're talking about some of the great poets from Syrian and writers from Syrian and Lebanese origin. I was just looking at a little bit about إلي أبو ماضي. أجديد أم قديم أنا في هذا الوجود؟ هل أنا حر طليق أم أسير في قيود؟ هل أنا قائد نفسي في حياتي أم مقود؟ أتمنى أنني أدري ولكن لست أدري. And basically the translation is, have I just begun this journey, or did I set off long ago? Do I wander like a free man, or am I dragged into chains? Am I leading my life, or am I being led? Am I being led? I wish I had the answer, but I cannot know. I mean, this is, when I read that, it just brings out so much nostalgia. I must tell you, when I went to Boston with my family, and one of the first thing we did, we went to there's like a monument for Gibran Khalil Gibran there. And we went there and we visited that. It was really great. And then I explained to my children, we teach in Arabic now, I explained to them the importance of connecting to these great poets. And I have quite a bit of collection of their poetry and writing. So hopefully we can do our part as people from Lebanese and Syrian background and Arabic background to teach our children their heritage. Dr. Bawardi, please tell me a little bit about the manuscript collection. You mentioned there's a manuscript collection that you're working on.
Well, I own a manuscript collection. I'm not a collector per se. I don't collect actively. But that was basically was the pathway for my, shifting gears and changing my entire career. So those I found in the homes of the descendants of the sons and daughters of the very first immigrants who came to this country. I was fortunate enough to take this course, although I dabbled in business, very successful as it were initially, like a good Arab, like many of us, through family links. But when I interviewed that fellow, he basically cued me at this long chain link of migration that led me to the genesis of, retail in American life, which was a stepping stone all the way back to the peddling days, which did not last very long, but it was very important. And he said, I have those papers that my father left me. Take a look, tell me what you think. And of course, what did I find there? I found Al-Khama'il, which is, a collection of poetry by Iri al-Madi, Nasib Arida's poetry and letters from the latter, and also Amir Rihani's Muluk al-Arab, Kings of Arabia, and all this works that I grew up with. So immediately I had a connection to someone I never met who lived between 1888 and 1913, who came to Flint, Michigan in 1914. And I knew that there's a lot to look for. So those papers became the backbone of my book about what I argue is the emergence of Arab American identity, which took place much sooner than we were led to believe by very capable scholars who simply did not have access to those manuscripts. And the entire thing was in Arabic, so I immediately recognized the need for, to look for more material and make it accessible and part of the discourse, much like what Linda is doing. Her book is, singular. She will talk about it, I hope, but it is singular in terms of looking at the early Little Syria in New York, the mother of all Little Syrias. They had them all over the country, by the way, but that was a major one. And I found a lot of rich material about the day-to-day life in Lower East Side of Manhattan, and Lower West Side of Manhattan, rather, in the company of Jewish and Italian and Polish immigrants. All of that is not part of the discourse, as we, notwithstanding Linda's work, hasn't been really fleshed out and made part of the discourse. So the manuscripts then tell tales about also their advocacy, first against the Ottoman Turks, which they wanted to wrest, independence from, but also their opposition to colonialism, French and British colonialism. And it went on. So I don't want to take that discussion in a different path, but their advocacy was old, organized, and it served as a stepping stone for them, much like business life into communal life and PTOs and membership in unions and what have you. But that advocacy solidified them and encouraged them to use the system of government, participate in elections and lobby and speak English and professionalize their skills of articulating expectations from society at large, as well as becoming part of American society. So all that is couched in those manuscripts. That's why I held on to them and made use of them.
Wonderful. And this is a question for all of you. And I'd like to start with Mr. Mahdi. Why is this, this monument is important?
Well, the Poets in the Park is what we refer to the monument initiative, the Rabita, Poets in the Park. And it's steps away from the original Arab American community, the first mother colony, as it's referred to. And it was there that the literary scene was vibrant and came about. So all of these writers were very active down on Washington Street in Lower Manhattan. It's a piece of history that seems to have been lost for quite a long time. And, ironically, it's come about at a time when that part of Manhattan has taken on special meaning because of contemporary events, 9/11 and elsewise. So, it plays against that narrative, and it speaks to a narrative that needs to come into relief. I think Linda's background in archaeology is right on. It needs to be it needs to be resurrected, and that's what we're doing. And I think that the park project, which would be a permanent public art memorial to the writers that came out of this original community, will be a forceful and much needed weight against what has not been always a positive narrative around Arab and Arab Americans in the United States.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dr. Jacobs?
So I want to just say a little bit about the colony as the literary hub, because it's so important not to forget
Sure.
that when these people came in the 19th century, many of them were literate, some were not, but there was this vibrant scene starting in the 1880s of people getting together and reciting poetry extemporaneously or writing poetry for events, baptisms, weddings, parties, anything like that. And people got together and recited poetry. The first Arabic language newspaper in the United States was published in New York in the Lower West Side in 1892. And part of their content was poetry written by members of the community, not just in New York, but all over the United States, who would send their poems in and have them published in Kawkab Amrika, which was the first newspaper. There were a half dozen newspapers published in New York in the 19th century, Arabic newspapers, another dozen that came about right after the turn of the 20th century. There were books published because each of the newspapers had its own press. And so they published, there were a half dozen books published in the 19th century and dozens more in the 20th. The first Arabic novel was published in New York in 1904. The second, third, and fourth novel were published in 1906, 1908, and 1910 by Afifa Karam, all published by the New York Arabic press. There was a lot of entertainment. People brought their oud and their kanuns over. They played for each other. They danced, they sang, and all of this was reported in the newspapers. So there was this fomenting cult literary and performance culture that fed into the Rabita, which is what we're celebrating at the Poets in the Poets in the Park monument that came a bit later.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have, before we take a break, Dr. Bawardi, we have 2 minutes. Could you tell us again, why is this important?
Well, the monument actually would be sort of a coup given the status quo. I mean, the Arab American community in New York is established, and their contributions and accomplishments are disproportionate and known to all. But the fact that they are interested in, excavating, to use an archaeological term, all this material that actually cements their attachment to the local community and beyond is very important. And there is nothing like the Arabic word to kind of take us through those threads of time and changes that connect Syrians, Palestinians, Lebanese, Iraqis, Moroccans, from the Gulf to the Atlantic, all identify with members of Al-Rabita, who also encapsulate the Arab American experience in the United States. And as I mentioned previously, they wrote about all kinds of things. One of those books I inherited from friends, the Dalak family, was published posthumously by the wife of Rizik Haddad. And the man was an accomplished poet and public speaker, well respected. He wrote about a host of things, those that were collected in this volume. And I mentioned the name to Linda, and he turned out to be the family doctor when she was a child, or even at birth. So there goes those connections that should be also extended to the American life and history as a whole.
Wonderful. I was just talking yesterday to a person about, I was asked about, there's a fallacy rather. Most people think that most Arab Americans are Muslims, which is not really true. Majority of Arab Americans are Christians, and there's really great history there because the Christian Arab Americans came to the United States, I want to say 200 years ago or maybe longer. You know better that Dr. Bawardi, you researched that.
1880.
Yeah.
We like to use a benchmark date is 1876, which is the date of the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition, I think is the official name, something along those lines. That's when those merchants came, displayed their wares, came back, went back to the homelands and spread the word. And then immigration really picked up. By 1890 was a peak year, continued until World War I put a stop to it. So.
Yeah. I was really astonished to learn that there are 5 Lebanons in America, small towns called Lebanon. And I was talking to former Secretary Ray Lahoud, and he mentioned to me that his parents got to what they got because this is how far the train went. And this is why they were in that little town. What we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned. Welcome back, and thank you for being with us. This is Khalil Hashim with Michigan.com. We're talking about a great subject. It's very dear to my heart. I have some of these books on my bookshelf. I have a ritual that I do almost every day at 4 o'clock. I like to make some tea and sit down and read Arabic poetry. Gibran Khalil Gibran, Ali Abu Madi, and Ahmad Shawqi, Mutanabbi, all of those, some of them are becoming difficult for me to read because it's old language. And I wanted to ask Mr. Madi, is there any efforts to really make these publications in both languages available to everyone?
That's a great question. I'm in possession, or my family's in possession of what my grandfather left behind as far as manuscripts and any writings and letters, and as well as his library. And it's a treasure trove that I only understood very recently because Dr. Bawardi visited our home and sat with my father, who the conversation was fascinating. And my father pulled out manuscripts that had never been seen before, had never been published. My interest has always been, and I guess this comes from being a filmmaker, has always been in bringing this material and this story to life, rather than it sitting on a wall or in a dusty library.
Exactly.
So I've been able to, in the past, organize events with the help of New York City. And this is years ago, before the Washington Street Historical Society, an event dedicated to my grandfather's work. And we brought in speakers and artists who really, it was amazing how they brought it to life. Beautifully recited poetry and music that accompanied, first person oral histories about working alongside my grandfather.
Absolutely.
So it's important, and it's something I think that we're trying at the Historical Society as well to do, bring it to life. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Bob. That's what the Park Project is about as well, because it will be bilingual.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good.
And a place for us to continue to hold public events and
Absolutely.
educate the public. Not only
The reason I asked that because the other day I was reading some poetry for Khalil Gibran, and my son says, "What does it mean?" And I read Arabic pretty well, and English is my second language. And as a journalist, I think, but I am not in a position to really translate that. Translators, as you all know, and you're all experts in this, are these have special talents for that. And it would be really a great contribution to our children. Not only want to teach them Arabic, we also want to teach them that heritage in English as well, so it became imprinted in their minds.
Yeah, if I might.
Yes.
By resurrecting the memory of their ancestors and parents and grandparents, as Bob and Linda and other members of the society are doing, they are actually cueing us to the need, or drawing attention to the dire need for translations. That book I mentioned by a collection of writings and speeches and poetry by Rizk Haddad, the writing of Habib Ibrahim Katiba, his memoirs, which I found, lodged in a crowded shelves at the Smithsonian, the work of Fuad Shatara and many others who are even outside the Rabita, membership in the Rabita. Unless those are translated, we simply will not have a clear idea about the day-to-day life of the Arab immigrants in their early days. Again, Linda's contribution, of course, is a step in that direction. I mean, just to give you an idea, a scholar at the University of Minnesota, Nabil Matar, managed to find how Arabs thought of America, writing on American soil between 1876 and 1914, which supported an entire volume. We need like maybe a dozen of those immediately, and then really get to work and translate the lives and writings and hopes and reflections of the members of Al-Rabita, but also the people who were around them. For example, Abbas Abu Shaqra was a personality in Michigan who did not stay in this country very, very long, maybe 20, 25 years or so before he went back. He went to Britain, as it were. I found his son in Britain. And he wrote extensively in Arabic. He was specialist in classical Arabic, very difficult stuff, but to many of us is accessible, translatable, which actually completes the New York experience because of the very close links between New York and Highland Park in Michigan, where there was another little Syria. For that matter, there was a little Syria in Flint, Michigan, where my manuscripts came from.
Yeah.
So such is the importance of translations.
Absolutely. And I would like Dr. Jacob to weigh on this as well.
Yeah, there's for someone who doesn't read Arabic very well, and Bob Mady and I are in the same position of this. I have all of my stuff translated, but for me, the main source of information are these Arabic newspapers, which are invaluable. As I said, the first one was published in 1892. There's Bob's great-grandfather, Najib Diab's Merat el-Gharb, which has not been translated at all. There's a wealth of information. There's Al-Huda. There's 65 years of Al-Huda, which hasn't been translated either. And the Moisset Allah Center in North Carolina is perfecting an optical character reader for Arabic, but it's not out yet, but eventually these newspapers will at least be searchable in Arabic. And so there will be research available, but for those of us who don't read Arabic, it takes a translator and someone going through the data that is really, really, and it's being lost very quickly. So we really need to have that done. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's the progress right now? And that question goes to all of you. Yeah. Yeah.
The monument.
Yeah.
Sorry, the progress on what?
On the monument.
So we're at the stage of negotiating with the city. Maybe Bob Mady wants to talk more about this. We have a design. We've picked an artist who is a French-Moroccan artist, very well known in France and in Morocco and worldwide. And she has done an incredible job of putting together of an alphabet, an Arabic alphabet taken from old Arabic manuscripts and monuments, and has redone the script. And we're doing a series of quotations from the Rabita writers in Arabic in mosaic around the park in Lower Manhattan, steps away from where the Syrian colony was. It will be beautiful with translations, both in regular Arabic script and in English.
Yeah.
And there will be tens of thousands of people who come by because it's near 9/11 and near the financial district. So it's really going to be important.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, do you want to add to that?
Sure. The Sarah Uhadu, who's the artist that will be leading the project as far as the design, was selected through the what's known as the Percent for Art process in New York City, and it was a cooperation between our organization, the Arab American community, and New York City. And it was quite a vetting process where we started with 50 artists, close to 50 artists from around the world, some very prominent artists.
Sure.
And we went through multiple iterations of this in the selection process to a final event which hosted 5 finalists to present, 4 or 5 finalists to present amongst not only the community, but a group of, established scholars and art critics. And Sarah's design won. And I think rightly so in a lot of respects. She's very interesting. She works, I don't want to speak too much about her work. I don't think that's my place, but her art design is based on the alphabet, as Linda had said, but a graphic interpretation that I believe she uses a software that she developed.
Yeah.
And in interpreting the Arabic script, it outputs a graphic interpretation that then she fabricates into colored tile. And it will be beautiful. You can go to, let me plug our website. You can go to our website and find out more about the project, wshsnyc.org. And there's beautiful mosaic illustrations that she's put together. So
Wonderful.
We're at the process of negotiating with the city. The designs have been, are far along, not fully complete, but far along. And the park is, it's a park that's being expanded and renovated, and it's near completion. So ready for us as we move forward, continue fundraising and work with the community and the city to make this happen.
Absolutely. What we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
جبلية مين جبلية؟
Ziyad New Lee seasoning, putting an end to international meat smuggling, one household at a time.
مين جبلية؟
Welcome back, and thank you for being with us. This is Khalil Hashim with YaMichigan.com. And we're talking about the writers and poets from Syrian and Arabic, Syrian, Lebanese, and Arabic origin being commemorated in a project in New York. I was reading the other day, and I'm going to read it in Arabic. And please don't ask me to translate, but I'll do my best to explain a little bit what Khalil Gibran is saying. إني مررت على الرياض الحالية وسمعت أنغام الطيور الشادية فطربت لكن لم يحب فؤادي كطيور أرضي وزهور بلادي. And basically he's talking about how wonderful it is here and all the good things that reminds him of his country, Lebanon, and that the best bird songs and the best flowers are there in Lebanon. So for you, Mr. Madi, do you see that strong connection between your grandfather and the Syrian Lebanese Arabic land?
Do I see a strong connection?
Yes, in his work, and from like family stories.
Certainly from family stories. I mean, this is what I grew up with, because his works, like I mentioned up front, are wholly, for the most part, inaccessible to me, except for befriending folks like Dr. Bawardi, who can provide insight and translations for me. But I grew up, I grew up literally sleeping amongst the boxes of Asamir. I like to think some of that kind of, through osmosis, I gathered some understanding, which I don't think is outside the realm of possibility. But there was there was a community that I grew up with that had that connection, direct connection, through the church, which was very important as as a
Sure.
center for community and faith, of course. And then there was just friendships, you know, the tribal cousins, as I like to refer, that extend across the country. And I think we can all say that to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand you have something you want to recite for 2 minutes.
No,
I saw a message
actually,
flashing.
I have a video if you'd like to.
That one we're gonna play at the beginning. Yeah, we're gonna play at the beginning of
this
the.
This was something else I had of recitation of Abu Mahdi. If you'd like, I can.
Okay.
I can.
Okay. Here's what we're gonna do before we get to that. You know, we have the Arabic American Museum here. I don't know how much cooperation between you and them have been, because, and this is something that Dr. Bawardi can talk about. You know, they have a great collection of a lot of things there, and I don't know if there has been any cooperation there. Dr. Bawardi?
Well, the museum, the Arab American National Museum, we're very proud of it, of course. It's a way station for like displaying a lot of artifacts and that kind of reflect the community's history locally and hopefully nationally. It is a work in progress. So we'd like to see more. We'd like to see the displays updated, for example, at least from my perspective as a historian, because the scholarship is changing and it's good to keep up with those changes. But we as a society, we do work with a host of organizations, including the Arab American National Museum. And I think Bob actually participated in the gala with this video. And moving forward, we will need to collaborate with not just the Arab American National Museum, but every organization out there and every person of means, in fact, because we are embarked on fundraiser now for our monument. Something we should mention to your listeners, to our brothers and sisters, the community at large across the oceans. It will take a lot of money to make this three-dimensional display happen.
Absolutely.
And we're going for broke. I mean, we have a world-renowned artist. We have an excellent, impressionist rendition of the Arabic word. We have selection of words themselves. Linda and Bob can speak about the display itself more. Oh, actually, we can show some pictures for the viewers to look at the artwork. It will be in Lower West Side of Manhattan, which is a very profound location, having started our American experience more or less from those parts. Although there were many entry ways into the US, but New York is extremely important.
Yeah. What can we do at Arabic speaking, for the Arabic speaking public? What can they do to really help with this project? What do you expect from them?
I think for the Arabic speaking folks, I hope what you've heard today convinced you that no matter how far we travel, where we go, how much time passes, we still have a very common bond that ties us together, whether you speak Arabic or not. We're Arabs because our parents spoke Arabic. We care about the Arabic word. We translate it. We look at their lives, their day-to-day lives. Now, it is time now to translate their lives into English and honor it in a monument. So we need from you all the support that can be mustered, in fact, in order to make this happen, to create a permanent presence for our history and collective memory in New York City itself, at the gateway of the United States.
Yeah. Is this your final thought?
It would be, yes. We need support to make this happen.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my colleagues have more to say.
Sounds good.
I'd like
Dr. Jacobs?
I'd like to just put in another plug for the website, because it does have all the drawings on wshsnyc.org. It's the Washington Street Historical Society, NewYorkCity.org. It's a really important project that we really need support from everyone if this is going to happen, but it will be the most important monument to Arab Americans in the United States. And maybe, it's really important. So I hope that people will go onto the website and think about donating to us.
Absolutely. Mr. Mahdi?
I back up Hani and Linda in urging people to visit our site and support us in any way you can. Certainly partnerships are important to us. financial support is important to us, but keep track, sign up, and keep your eyes out for further developments. My last thoughts on this are, my senses from what I know more and more is the writers saw themselves as a bridge between where they came from and where they ended up.
Exactly.
And this park is the other side of that bridge. This is where the bridge leads to in metaphorical terms.
Absolutely.
And it's important in that way to realize their vision and to bring the history of Arab America and its origins into its rightful place in American history.
Absolutely. You heard it, everybody. This is a great project and it needs everybody's support. And I want to thank you all for taking part of this. And that 2-minute video, we're going to just sign off with. Once I finish thanking everyone, then we can do that. And thanks to Adil Mazib for this great work to bring us together. Thanks to Layla Al-Husni for giving us the opportunity, Dr. Bawardi, Dr. Jacobs, Mr. Madi, everyone. This is a great project. I hope that you also make it more interactive, meaning that when you do all this display, there'll be areas where people can text certain numbers and then get a lot of information about different author, different thing that directs into their websites and all of that, because we want to bring the young generation into this. I want to thank you so much. And then we're going to sign off with the 2-minute video that you have from Elia Abu Madi. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
القصر والكوخ من الطلاسم ولقد أبصرت قصرا شاهقا عالي القباب قلت ما شادك من شادك إلا للخراب ولقد أبصرت قصرا شاهقا عالي القباب قلت ما شادك من شادك إلا للخراب أنت جزء منه لكن لست تدري كيف غاب وهو لا يعلم ما تحوي أيدري لست أدري يا مثالا كان وهما قبل ما شاء البنات يا مثالا كان وهما قبل ما شاء البنات أنت فكر في دماغ غيبته الظلمات أنت أمنية قلب أكلته الحشرات أنت بانيك الذي شادك لا 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 لست أدري